Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 22 of Shanalyics. Today, I'm joined by Vinny. We're both really excited to bring you everything from 49ers training camp. But before we get into everything, I want to let everybody know that Vinny and I will be doing a regular show starting this Monday and all the Mondays from here on out throughout the season. So I'm really excited to be doing that with you, Vinny. This is going to be a lot of fun covering the 49ers this season with you, man. First of all, I just want to shout you out for coming on. People should go check you out on YouTube. They should go check you out on Twitter. Your @ is right there. What's your YouTube channel again, just for everybody?
It's just my name. It's just the full name. So it's instead of Vinny Saglimbeni, it's Vincent Saglimbeni. So check me out there. We had our did a first second live stream last week with a couple of my buddies with our other pods. So expect more of those coming in these next few weeks.
Yeah, and today we're going to be going over the ups and downs of 49ers training camp. This is the 5th day of camp, and in fact, just as we've been talking about 4 minutes before we started, Trey Lance threw his first interception of 49ers training camp. So
the world is ending, guys. Trey Lance threw a pick. It's not going to work. We need to trade him.
Yeah, cut Trey Lance right now already. First of all, shout out Korean 49er. How you doing, Ekim? It's great to see you in there, my man. And we got a poll going in the comments for everybody on my YouTube channel. Who's going to start week 1? Let us know who you think will start week 1. I'll check on that at the end, see how that poll is going for everybody. But like I said, today we're going to be going over the ups and downs of training camp. We're going to be talking about everything 49ers. And I want to let everybody know, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel already, make sure you go do that. It's just my name, Ben Meyerson, if you're over on Twitter. And make sure you give this video a like if you're enjoying it. We're going to be doing this every Monday, like I said. And then this week, I'll be back again on Thursday with Coach Johnston from Grant's channel. I'm really excited to have him on, and I'm planning on having a Friday show. I'll be putting that together soon. I'll let you guys know who I'll be having on, when we'll be doing it. But Vinny, let's get into everything, because we're going to start with the ups and downs of training camp. And what we're going to do now is we're each going to go back and forth and give players or positions or whatever in terms of what we think is the good and in terms of what we think is the bad in training camp. So we're going to start in terms of the good of training camp. But Vinny and I were talking before the show, and we decided that there's one good that we both agree on and that we both make sure we want to talk about. So Vinny, just bring it up for everybody. What's our first good of training camp?
It is, without a doubt, I think Trey Lance.
Absolutely.
The guy, obviously, like you just mentioned, Ben, he threw his first pick of training camp. I think, like you said, Chris Baderman said it was like a goal line, like picked at the goal line. Yeah. But, I mean, looking at, Twitter, listening to what people are saying that are there, it seems like he's just at a whole different level than what I guess the 49ers and fans really thought he would be at. And that is a very promising sign for him. And it's kind of impressive in a way, knowing that he hadn't played in a year and making his way into the NFL, adjusting to the NFL lifestyle and that system. Today, as per Jason Aponte, who was at camp today, he went 9 of 12 today, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Really effective with the zone read, and Jimmy went 11 of 16 to 2 touchdowns and a pick and finished up strong. So, very healthy play from the quarterbacks. Jimmy's really picking it up these past couple of days. He was kind of struggling in the beginning from what I saw and from what I was seeing on social media. And, a thing, too, that Grant talked about, I watched one of Grant's clips yesterday when he was talking with his dad. He mentioned how Kyle Shanahan kind of took him off to the side with the running backs, and they were working on, zone reads, and that was, they were running that to a T from what I was seeing. And, I think that's a very promising sign, understanding Kyle is committed to making sure that this guy is, on the right path in his development. And it's only day 5.
it must have made Jimmy Garoppolo feel a certain way, saying that the quarterbacks are working in individual drills. Trey Lance is over there working individually with Kyle Shanahan, and I mean, I like you were saying from Grant's video, it seemed like that's something he's never done with a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah. So this is a unique situation.
Because I don't know if he ever did that with Matt Ryan. Even with Matt Ryan, I don't know if he ever did that kind of thing. Maybe he did it with RG3. We don't know.
Yeah,
but it's interesting, and the thing that's like really impressing me about all of this is that looking at a mobile quarterback, it's very easy just to say they're an athlete playing quarterback. But in the instance of Trey Lance, he's a quarterback who's an athlete. And that's what really Kyle Shanahan wants to get out of this. And I think he is doing that, but also Trey is understanding he's not an athlete playing quarterback, right? He's stepping up in the pocket when he gets pressure.
And like we saw from I'm sorry to cut you off, but I was just going to say, we saw from Kyle Shanahan's press conference from forever ago when he was describing his perfect quarterback over the offseason. He said it's a guy who can throw like Drew Brees and run like Lamar Jackson, right? And I'm not going to say Trey Lance can exactly do those things, but I think he brings that same sort of idea like you're talking about, how he's a pocket passer who also has the ability to make so much up in the ground game and really be not just gain yards and make big plays and all that kind of stuff. That stuff is great, but I think the real carrot on top that's going to help out Kyle Shanahan, that's going to help out the 49ers in specific, is that because of the threat that Trey Lance creates, it makes life so much easier for the rest of the team, right? Because when the defense has to worry about whether or not Trey Lance is going to pull it back and take it for a run himself on that zone read, makes life a lot easier for guys like Raheem Mostert and for Deebo Samuel and for Kyle Juszczyk. So I think for the 49ers with Trey Lance specifically, in the first 3 days, like I've seen multiple people talk about, he was a purely pocket passer. They didn't see scrambling from him. He didn't run at all. But that was and I know if people saw Grant's video, it seems like that was in the intention of if not the coaching staff from Trey's perspective, proving that he's the type of guy that he's, like you said, a quarterback. But he's a quarterback who can run. He's not a runner who throws, right? There is a big difference.
Because like what Grant mentioned too, like Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, when they have pressure, they always go back and they backpedal and they try and scramble around. But with Trey Lance, from what we've heard, for what most have seen who are there, he's really stepping up into that pocket, and that's really good. And I want to see I'm happy that Trey Lance threw a pick today, because I need to, as bad as that may sound, obviously you want to see Trey Lance do very well, and ideally you don't want to have him. You want him to throw 50 touchdowns and 0 picks, right? But I need to see Trey Lance one of these days just have a absolutely terrible day, the worst practice of his life, just so I can see how he can rebound from it. Because most of, his journey, especially in college, being at, North Dakota State, they were the Alabama of the FCS, right? Because FBS is FCS. So they were far. North Dakota State was far and away better than literally everyone else, and Trey Lance was by far the best player in that conference, right? So I want to see him, how he faces that adversity and how he can adjust to it at a 21-year-old, being a 21-year-old kid, right? I'm older than Trey Lance.
I know, that's the crazy thing, Vinny. We're both older than Trey Lance. We're both about to enter our senior year in college, right? And Trey Lance is younger than both of we are. So this is a kid who has all the expectations of the world on him, of course, but I mean, just the amount of pressure as a 21-year-old who's, this is your first professional job. I mean, I think he's been handling it really well so far. And I just want to end on this with Trey Lance, and we'll talk about this later, but I think I've gotten to the point, and I think you might agree with me on this, Vinny. Tell me if you disagree, that I think the upside that Trey Lance presents and the potential of Trey Lance far outweighs what the 49ers would have with Jimmy Garoppolo this year. Maybe not far, but I think it's starting to get to the point where a lot of fans are realizing that the downside of Jimmy Garoppolo and the potential of things going wrong is not quite worth it because Trey Lance offers so much upside.
Yeah, I've been pretty consistent on that too. I've been consistently saying, like, if he's better than him in camp, if he's more prepared and he's ready for week 1, there's no reason for them not to start him week 1. And it seems like, based on what we've seen and based on what we've heard, he's very much on that trajectory. And, Peter King released an article yesterday with the 49ers. There was like of the 90 players that had logged on hours on their iPad time looking at film, Trey Lance was on the top. So that is a very promising sign. It's looking like, it's easy to overreact only having 5 days of camp, but based on what we have and based on the evidence, it seems to me that Kyle Shanahan made the right pick. And that's very exciting for, 49ers fans, especially us being in the younger generation of 49ers fans, seeing because we didn't really get to watch Jeff Garcia be good. We had 2 good years of Cap, and Alex Smith, there was the 2011 year where he was pretty good. And, after that 2013 year in Seattle in the NFC Championship game, the quarterback play hasn't been to the standard of what other older 49er fans have seen. And so hopefully Trey Lance can be that guy for us.
Yeah, I think that's the hope. And to me, it's starting to seem that seems like where we're heading towards, Vinny. But let's get into I don't want to call this a draft today, but we're gonna go back and forth picking who we thought performed well in training camp from all the reports we've seen. We're each gonna be picking players, so we're gonna give 3 each in terms of what we thought of who did good in training camp. Then we'll get into the bad of training camp next. Vinny, so with your first pick, who are you gonna pick in terms of who you think has been really good so far, and from all you've seen, who's impressed?
Maybe not so much from a production standpoint, but I think a really big good, I think it's like the next best thing with Trey Lance. Like, Trey Lance is the first good. For me, it's D Ford. I think it's huge that he hasn't missed, knock on wood, he hasn't missed a practice yet. And the one that he missed, it was a maintenance day. So, guys get maintenance days all the time. It doesn't really, matter too much. And I think it was either Jason Ponte or Splash Cousin tweeted out that D Ford was going against 11s, was in the 11v11s today. And that is huge because I'm of the opinion that if he is fully healthy and when he plays, he is a top 5 player on this roster. I don't think there's not many other people in the league that can do what he does at the level that he can do it at. And the questions that have always been with D Ford is, can he just stay on the field? And even if it's just for passing downs this year, that is a huge help because I don't think they're expecting him. They didn't really sign him to be a run stopper on the edge. They signed him to get sacks, and you can only get sacks when the quarterback is attempting a pass. It's that simple, right? So when he's in on those passing downs, I think that's going to be huge, especially with Bosa hopefully being back on the other side, being at the level of health that he can be at. Zach Kerr's had a pretty good camp thus far, and Javon Kinlaw in year 2, Eric Armstead. That defensive line is really, really deep. Maybe not to the level of top heavy talent in 2019. I don't know if any of those guys are still better than DeForest Buckner, but it's a very promising sign. If they can get some production out of D4 this year, it's better than not having any production at all. So I think it is huge that he hasn't had to miss a practice yet. I think that's one of my main gets.
Yeah, that was at the top of my list too. That's who I was going to pick with one of my first or second picks as well. I think for D Ford specifically, if you go back to 2019, you brought that up. In 2019, he had the second best pass rush win rate on the team out of the entire defensive line, 15%. He was winning of his pass rushes. Last year, that was 7%, obviously a smaller sample size. But I think going back to what you're saying, if the Niners can get good production from D Ford on third downs, if they can create pressure on obvious passing situations where they otherwise weren't getting it from Dee Ford. It's an absolute plus for this defensive line. And I think it upgrades the potential of this 49ers defense from being a really good defense to a potentially great defense. I'm not going to say that they will be great necessarily, but it raises the ceiling of what the 49ers defense could look like this year if Dee Ford is on this team. And I think it does significantly change the outlook of this season if we can get a healthy Dee Ford and if the 49ers can expect to get anything from him. Because, I mean, Vinny, the word before the season was that Dee Ford might just end up retiring. It was really dire. So just to see him out at practice, and then like you were saying today, it seems like he's at 11 on 11s. Things seem to be trending in the right direction for Dee Ford. I'm going to knock on wood because I just said that out loud, but I think Dee Ford was a great pick. And if I could go to my next pick, for me, I'm going to go with Deebo Samuel. And I'm going with Deebo Samuel because from everything we've seen, including, I mean, this isn't just one reporter, this isn't just one media member, this is multiple people. He seems to be the best player on the 49ers offense right now. And for Deebo Samuel, if he can stay healthy, I think he can have a real DJ Moore type season for the 49ers, 1,200-ish yards. I think he can have that type of production, and not just that type of production on the team, but that impact that we saw him have that rookie season with the 49ers. I think it's going to be that, but even better because like we've been seeing from all the clips in training camp, it seems like Deebo's getting more balls down the field. It seems like he's getting more opportunities down the field. It seems like he's going to be in a better position to win and have a bigger impact on the team this season. So I'm really excited to see that Deebo Samuel is playing really well. And I think, a lot of us, including myself, were really excited about Brandon Ayuk. And not that we were diminishing anything that Deebo was doing, but to have both of those guys potentially at their best, and to have Deebo be fully healthy and not be worrying about his broken foot like he was all last year, this is a huge win for the 49ers. And I think it adds a certain level of certainty to their offense to where going into training camp, I was worried about that production they were going to get out of the wide receiver position. They have Ayuk, they have Deebo, but both of those guys do have injury concerns. And if you don't have to worry as much about Deebo, and with Ayuk, it's really just minor things with him. It's hamstring things, it's calf strains, stuff like that, where if at most it'll be 1 to 2 weeks. So I think with Deebo specifically, it's hugely important to have him be a high impact player on this team. And if he can be healthy, I hate that we're being so positive right now, but I really do think sky's the limit for this offense. If Deebo, Ayuk, Kittle are all doing their thing on this team, it's a really good sign for the 49ers.
And part of that, too, is I think a lot of people would say it's kind of contingent on who is that quarterback and how Kyle Shanahan decides to use him, right? Because I think you can still get production from Deebo Samuel getting a higher volume in those end arounds and a lot of design runs for him. But like you mentioned, Trey Lance getting the ball more downfield than Garoppolo, like we've seen in camp, getting that more production kind of alleviates some of that. That's 2-3 less carries Deebo would be taking. And you can really put him in that wide receiver role, which he is a very, very good route runner. Kind of allowing the offense to kind of expand, and you can still do those runs, but not at the level to where you're kind of maybe feeling like you're running him into the ground and increasing the potential of more injuries, especially on his lower body. So I think, Deebo has been really, really good so far, and it's going to be interesting to see how they use him and how that's affected by who starts at quarterback. I hate bringing it all back to the quarterback because I know everybody's been talking about it for probably the last year and a half, 2 years.
But it matters, Vinny. It
does.
Matters.
Absolutely.
And I think the thing with Deebo, too, is like you're saying, if he can get away from being more, not that he shouldn't do less of this, but if they can make him more of a receiver rather than a weapon, I think it's just better for his long-term health. So if he is running better deep routes, if they can get more diversity from him at the wide receiver position, I think it's absolutely a plus for the 49ers and for Deebo Samuel, really. Yeah. So, Vinny, who for you, though, who's the second player you're looking at in terms of the good in training camp for the 49ers?
I'm going to stick on the offense, but I'm going to move to the offensive line to the starting right tackle for the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay.
And that's Mike McGlinchey. I think looking at him, he looks a lot like, maybe he doesn't like look like Pinner, but as an offensive lineman, it looks like he padded on, like, he looks like, I think they said he added like 25 pounds or something like that, 10, 15. He looks like bigger. Like he looks like 310, 315 now. And
that's what he said. He said he's ranging between 315 and 320. That's what Mike McGlinchey says. So that is great news for 49ers fans.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And and he's going to be a very important part, I think, in the success of, this offense in the sense that he definitely struggled last year. And I think context kind of had to play a role in that. Otherwise, with like having switching right guards there and
the inconsistency,
that kind of things, inconsistency, and like just that offensive line and the quarterback play as well. It wasn't all on him. Like obviously he had his blunders from time to time, but it wasn't all just him. Not just all him being bad. Because he's not a bad player in my opinion. I think he's actually a pretty good one. So he's definitely been a good in this training camp thus far. And again, kind of similar to what Trey kind of hoped that he does, adjust into that, once you hit week one. And I think having Bosa back, having that competition on the week to week, having D Ford week to week, having speed guy like Samson Ebicom is helping him as well. And, maybe, we know maybe D'Amico Ryans has drawn up some, defensive schemes where they have that nickel blitz like Robert Saleh did a couple times last year, where you kind of saw McGlinchey struggle on some of those plays. So McGlinchey has definitely been very much a good in this training camp thus far, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and a big part of this too, and I feel like we really have to acknowledge this, is the mental side from Mike McGlinchey. Seems like
it's there. He's there. It seems like he's there now. Like
it seems like last year was like for Mike, like a lot of us. So one of the worst years of his life. I mean, really, he talked about it openly. I don't feel like I'm overreaching by saying that if you listen to the way he talked in his press conferences this past week. And the thing I feel like we don't key into enough, as maybe not as sports journalists, but as sports viewers in general, is there's so much emotion, there's so much behind the scenes stuff, and we don't know what's going on in people's lives. And for a guy like Mike McGlinchey to not be able to, like he was saying, I was watching his press conference just the other day, not having gyms open, not having the dietary people that he has access to, not being able to get into the gym as often, it all affected him. And for offensive linemen, I mean, they have to be eating constantly. It really is this upkeep, right, of constant weight upkeep that you can't slow down on. And then with everything going on with the pandemic, you're forced to slow down, right? Obviously,
and that's
a certain way.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you there, but it's that point. I think it's people like normal people like us thinking like, oh, you just eat more and then you're gonna be fine. Like it's not that simple. No. And I think that's where like you mentioned, context is very important when evaluating not just this but also everything. Plus, the mental aspect of the pandemic as well. I think took a toll on some players, like not just McGlinchey, but you asked your whole team. Your whole team was forced to play your home games in a different state.
And they were isolated in hotel rooms too. That's the thing. They're not at home. They can't interact with any of their teammates. They're as isolated and as lonely as it gets. Yeah. And if you have any sort of mental anguish going on, if you have any sort of anxiety, that would only amp that up to the nines, right? So to expect Mike McGlinchey to have a bounce back here, it's obviously about that weight. It's obviously about him playing better, but just the mental aspect of football, it's so tiring on people. And to see a guy like Mike McGlinchey doing so better, I'm really happy for him as a human being, but in terms of the football aspect of this, playing that sort of way last year, it just craters your confidence. And I think him getting that captain spot last year, I think it all affected him in this sort of way where it was a perfect storm of all the bad things, right?
Plus it was his first year without Joe Staley. So
that's a big thing,
and it kind of felt like he was trying to be Joe Staley. Yeah. Like he was trying to embrace that role. But I think, like we mentioned with context, having Trent Williams there now and being sure like he is here now, I think that's only going to help him too. Understanding how to be that pro and how to be an elite.
And Alex Mack seems like more Mack too, like at offensive line. That's the guy that I'm really. If we don't get play out of Alex Mack, I think his impact as a person will be hugely felt on this offensive line.
And we're not assuming that McGlinchey is going through this stuff, and that's not safe to assume. But it could have been something that he, and many other players went through. So I'm more likely than not, I'm pretty safe in saying that he's going to have a bounce back year.
I agree with that. Vinny. And for me, I'm going to do my next player now. The guy, I have a few guys on my list I'm looking at. I'm going to save one guy for my next round because I don't know if you're going to say him, and I got some good stuff on him. So I'll save that. But let's talk about Jason Veret. Jason Veret, up until this past season, pretty much was never healthy throughout all of training camp. He was always missing time, even going up, leading to the season. And right now, it seems like Jason Veret is healthy as he's ever been. It seems like he's playing as good as he's ever been. In fact, people were calling him the best coverage player on the field. And for the 49ers, I think Jason Veret is one of the most important players to their success this season. If he is healthy for all 17 games, the difference between having him and not having him will be hugely felt on the 49ers. So I think for them, the DB position is already a questionable position in my mind, at least with their cornerback depth. And for the 49ers, they really need Jason Veret to stay healthy, and they really need him to play well. And it seems like he's done both so far through training camp.
Yeah. No, and he's we mentioned it last time. I think there's certain players that you look at on this team, if they were to get hurt, then they would be in very big trouble, right? One of those players is Jason Veret. Another is Fred Warner, and the other is, I believe, to be Nick Bosa. So having 17 games out of him would be huge, especially with the, Tamika Ryans being a year one DC, a little thinner on the, DBs, after Veret, like Emmanuel Mosley's on the COVID list.
Ambry Thomas hasn't played well.
Ambry Thomas hasn't. Yeah. And then I think Dante Johnson was cornerback too today on the other side of him. So, and, he's had his ups and downs for sure. So it's, Veret is going to be a very, very important piece to this team.
Yeah. I feel like really outside of the defensive line, he might be maybe that most important defensive piece. I mean, obviously Fred Warner is very important, but with Jason Veret, with his injury history, like you said, the potential downside of Jason Veret, and if things go bad with Veret, like Ekim brought up in the comments, I mean, look right here. He says if Veret goes down, this is going to be a disaster. I absolutely agree with that statement. I think if the 49ers were to lose him or Mosley for the season, I feel like it would be a disaster. Obviously less so with Mosley, but point stands is that the 49ers don't have enough cornerback depth to where they can afford to lose any of these guys. I mean, you obviously don't wish injury on anyone, but if there's one position where, as a 49ers fan, you hope they don't get any injuries, I think right now, number one on defense is going to be cornerback.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
Well, how about this, Vinny? What's the next player you're looking at? And for everybody watching at home, we're going to move to the bad of training camp after this, and we're each going to pick 3 players like we did for this. But, Vinny, for your last player, who's the guy you're looking at?
I got 2 in mind. I guess they're kind of 1A and 3A and 3B, but I'm going to go And then if I say the name that you were talking about with your third that you didn't think I was going to mention, then I'll mention the other guy.
Okay.
I'll go with you know what? I'll go with Azeez. I'll go with Azeez Al-Shaair.
Go for it, man. Yeah.
I think he has had from what, especially, Jordan Splash Cousin, he's been tweeting, he has had a very, very good camp so far. And unfortunately, I think he had to, be pulled out of practice today, I think, because he had maybe sustained a little injury or whatever the case was. But, with Quan Alexander on the team the last couple of years, we hadn't been able to really see, what he could have become. And he is one of the, the faster, he kind of fits like what the 49ers were looking for when the Lynch and Shanahan era kind of took over, just, fast guys that just play fast and play hard. He's definitely one of those guys. And, seeing what the production has shown from him, shown in these past, few days, I think he's in a really, really good spot to be that third linebacker in that base set if they go 4-3. And, he may not be as good of a coverage guy as Quan, but I think he could do enough to where he could really fill into that spot really well. So that's going to be my, third plus. And, it's good to like you mentioned too earlier, Ben, the depth of the linebacker position was a question that I think some people had that is kind of starting to get answered now. Obviously we know Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw are going to be the first two, but after that, who's really going to fill in? I think Azeez has been filling in really well, and also Demetrius Flanagan Foles.
I believe Marcel Harris has moved down to
Marcel Harris got moved to a linebacker spot. So the linebacker room is looking pretty good right now.
Oh, absolutely. I think the linebacker depth is looking off the charts. It was something people had worried about before the season, and I pushed back on that worry because I felt like, not that the linebacker position is less important than the rest of the ones on defense, but I wouldn't want that to be my deepest position on defense. And with the 49ers, it seems like they have enough depth to get through the season, and they have enough guys they're confident in. And like you said, with Al-Shaair, I believe Dre Greenlaw missed practice the other day because he had a blister on his foot. So to see him getting those reps, to see him going in and doing well, it's really it's a great plus for the 49ers. It's going to be really important for them throughout the whole season because, health is going to be an issue this season, but like we've been seeing with COVID numbers, with everything going on in the world, COVID's not disappearing from the game of football. It's certainly going to affect football. So having that depth moving forward is hugely important, especially at those sort of positions. So I think it's going to be really great to have guys like Al-Shaair, Dre Greenlaw, Demetrius Flanagan, Foles. It's super important to have those guys doing well and on your team as well. I agree with you. That wasn't the guy I was thinking about, Vinny. For my last pick, I'm looking at the pass rush. And honestly, I wish you would have made life easier for me, man, because I'm looking at two guys right now. I'm struggling with it internally. But the guy I'm going to go with, who's had a good training camp so far, is I'm going to go with Kevin Gibbons. Okay. I want to talk about Kevin Gibbons really quick. If you look last season at PFF's pass rush win rate grade, out of all the interior defensive linemen for the 49ers, Kevin Gibbons and DJ Jones led them all in pass rush win rate. And if you go back to 2019 when the 49ers had Buckner, obviously, Buckner was actually behind Kevin Gibbons in terms of pass rush win rate in 2019. In fact, DeForest Buckner was at 13% win rate. Gibbons was at a 16.7 win rate. Last season, he was around 13-12%. So this is a guy who is really just done super well in terms of the pass rush. And then this training camp in specific, it seems like he's getting more first-team reps. It seems like he's getting more opportunity. And with Javon Kinlaw struggling seemingly and him missing practice and him not playing in 11-on-11s, missing time, it seems like the 49ers are going to need other answers at those positions. So having guys like Kevin Gibbons and DJ Jones is going to be hugely important because specifically with the pass rush, I think people need to realize is having that 4-man pass rush like the 49ers had in 2019. It's great. It's awesome, right? But the problem with that is that it's more prudent to have 7 good pass rushers than it is to have 4 great pass rushers, because throughout a game, throughout the length of a season, guys get tired. You're not going to be able to rely on them all the time. And you want to bring defensive linemen in terms of in waves of units. So you don't want to have to rely on 4 guys all the time. So for the 49ers, if they can have DJ Jones, Eric Armstead, D Ford, Nick Bosa as their starters, with Kevin Gibbons, Arden Key, Samson Ebukam behind them, Vinny, I feel like that is a deep pass rushing room. And
definitely.
I'm really excited for Kevin Gibbons. I think this is going to be the season when he really breaks out.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, it's really good having 4, 5, 6 guys on that interior. And it seems like, a lot of teams are kind of focusing on just more edge help, but the Niners are kind of seemingly going more towards interior help. So maybe this could be a thing where, like Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers like to do. They play, they're playing chess, everyone else playing checkers. So, Kevin Gibbons, I think, has been a pretty good player. I think DJ Jones, like you mentioned, has been even better. And I think that's really going to be good for this team definitely this year, just the different looks that they can give. Like you mentioned, Gibbons, DJ Jones, Katavius Street, Zach Kerr. Even you can, like you mentioned, you can put in Armstead. And sometimes there were times in 2019, even when Bosa was playing on the interior too. So they got a lot of options of what they can do, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of plays out.
Yeah, I think it'll be super interesting. One guy I want to give a shout out to before we get into the bad of training camp is Arden Key. He caused a fumble between Trey Lance and Trey Sermon, and I just want to give some other stats because I was looking at pass rush win rate specifically. It's what I've been doing a deep dive into recently with Arden Key specifically. Average a 14% win rate on pressures. That was first on the Raiders for like the last 3 seasons. And if you look comparatively, a guy like D Ford was at 15% in 2019. So that is a near damn elite pass rusher in terms of
that also just comes to show how good D Ford is. And that was 15% on limited snaps, right?
Exactly. It was on limited snaps, limited situations. You didn't have all the sample size like you'd have from other guys. So for him, for 15+%, it's huge. He was second on the team when he had that. So having a guy like Arden Key, bringing him in who's at 14%, I think it's only going to help the 49ers. But let's get to the negatives of training camp, Vinny. Let's talk about this. For you, you can go first for us. Who do you think is the first negative you look at in terms of training camp? Who do you think's had a bad training camp so far?
Well, I first want to give my other guy that I was going to give a shout out to.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Was Mohamed Sanu. I think he's had a really good training camp. But along with that, I don't think it's necessarily a player, but I think it's I guess maybe not so much like a bad, but I think thing that is still in question is that wide receiver 3 role. I still don't think anyone has really taken it by the grip, taken it by its grasp and really owned it. I think Sanu is in the lead right now because he has looked pretty decent. We got an F-bomb out of Jimmy. You never hear F-bombs from Jimmy.
Yeah.
Right? So that means that's got to mean something, right? So I think, but there is still kind of a competition there. And, like we mentioned before and like many others have talked about, this wide receiver 3 role is a pretty important role in the grand scheme of things. Assume if there is a circumstance that either Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel do get injured. So that kind of being up in the air still is a little bit of a concern, but it's not the worst thing that could happen, right? There's a lot more problems that they could have.
Yeah, I don't think it's the end of the world for the 49ers, but not having Jalen Hurd playing 11 on 11s yet, not getting anything from Richie James Jr. I mean, seems like right now the receivers who are fighting for that spot is Mohamed Sanu, Trent Sherfield, Jawan Jennings. Those names aren't the most exciting names for 49ers fans. So if they can get some more depth at that position, I think they certainly should try to. I don't know if they actually will, but I mean, I would recommend doing that because I think the situation stands right now, like you pointed out, 49ers sustain any injuries to the wide receiver position is bad news. It's really bad news for the 49ers. And given the injury history of the guys on this team, it should be a worry of this front office. Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, the guy I'm going to start with is I'm going to do Javon Kinlaw. I think for Javon Kenlong, there were high expectations for him coming out, and specifically if you look with the 49ers interior defensive line, there's so many other guys who are getting opportunities. It almost seems like the 49ers were expecting not to get much from Javon Kinlaw. They have guys like Zach Kerr in the building. They have guys like DJ Jones, Kevin Gibbons, all guys who can fill that role. Eric Armstead. I just feel like for Javon Kinlaw, he needed to do well, and he needed to do better than he did last season. And right now, he's not even practicing fully with the team. He's there at some practices. He's doing some individual drills, but he's not doing everything. He's dealing with knee soreness. He's getting inflammation. I mean, there's all kinds of issues to where it is a serious issue with Javon Kinlaw. And I saw this specific stat that I mentioned to Vinny before we started, which is just crushing. Last season on the 49ers, the only player who had a worse pass rush win rate than Javon Kinlaw last season, Solomon Thomas. So Javon Kinlaw did not prove himself last year. And so far through training camp, doesn't seem like he's proved a lot.
And yeah, he is coming off a knee surgery, I believe, a few months ago. So that is something that you gotta, think about there. But yeah, I think it's only year 2 for him, but I think it is somewhat of a big year for him. You did essentially, although it's not really fair to do it, you kind of traded him to replace DeForest Buckner. And I think a lot of people are having those expectations for him because he is that replacement and he is still wearing the same number as DeForest Buckner did.
Yeah.
As little of a detail as that may be, that is what could come.
It matters.
And so, yeah, I think it wouldn't be as much of a problem if they weren't as deep at the interior line, defensive line, kind of like what we talked about earlier. But no, and he did show some, big highlights last year. The Saints game, he had a really good game. Obviously, he had the pick 6 at SoFi. So I think for him, it's just a matter of just getting more reps, getting into that system, because he is a pretty, heading into the league, he was just pretty reliant on his bull rush and just running through people, whereas obviously in the NFL, you can't do that as much. So,
no. Yeah,
we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes with Kinlaw. And specifically, I think for 49ers fans, I don't think he needs to be DeForest Buckner. He just needs to improve from where he was last season. That's the main thing, really, is he was almost, I don't want to say 0 last season, but he wasn't a huge plus for the 49ers in any sort of way. So if he can just be any sort of positive for the 49ers, that's good at this point, because he had certainly very high expectations. But to me, is you just got to get something out of him, because I think they're fine at the interior defensive line position. If they didn't have Kinlaw at all in this roster, I think they'd be okay. But the point is that you spent that high of a draft pick on that player. You would certainly hope that he does better. And listen, the last year with the pandemic and everything, I'm sure it was hard for all rookies specifically. And I hope he does better this season. I don't know if he will. And like I said, when you go into the numbers specifically, I mean, literally one of the worst pass rush win rates on the team. So this is a guy who just hasn't proven it so far and needs to go above and beyond, in my opinion, to prove to everyone that he was, if not at least worthy of that pick, worthy of still being on the 49ers, because I'm starting to question that. If we get the same sort of season out of Javon Kinlaw this season that we got last season, I think the front office would certainly start questioning what they would want to do with Javon Kinlaw. Unfortunately.
No, that's definitely a possibility. It's not out of the realm, but I think he'll have a, improvement year this year, in my opinion.
Okay. So for you, Vinny, who is that second bad? Who do you think struggled through training camp so far?
It's kind of along the lines with wide receiver 3 thing, I think there's still some question marks about Jalen Hurd's availability.
Yeah.
I think he came back today, I think, and he was on the side working on 11s. I think Bosa was on the side too, getting some separate work in. But I think, like, it's hard to really this is kind of part of the negative, I guess. It's hard to evaluate a guy that you haven't seen play before. We saw one game from him, and he had a good game, and we haven't seen him play since. Yeah. And I think he is on the up, and I still think there is something there with Jalen Hurd. It's just hard for the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, that team to look at him and be like, we need you, and we need to kind of rely on him because he's not playing. So I think he still has like all the talent in the world. Like I think he could, like, when he does play, he could have a big impact on this offense, right? Peter King mentioned a couple of years ago, like when he was first drafted, he was the best player in camp, and he was could have been offensive rookie of the year. Yeah. Then again, he said the same thing about Trent Taylor, but I think it's fair to say that Trent Taylor is a lot different of a player than Jalen Hurd is. So I think that's where I guess it's a little bit of a negative because you want to see him play. But I still think there is something there with him, but it doesn't look.
It's not promising right now.
No, when he's not on the field, and it helped that he was back on the field today. That's huge.
It did help that he's certainly back on the field, but like if you look at a guy like him versus a guy like D4's already participating in 11 on 11s. So I for the 49ers, Jalen Hurd, he's like where's Waldo at this point? It's like is he there? I mean, I don't even know if we can really find him. Vinny's gonna come right back, guys. I'm just gonna take a break. I'm gonna look at some comments right here for everybody. Vinny's gonna jump back in a minute. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Our RMOB station, bro, don't be hating on my facial hair, man. Don't be hating on it. Come on, man. Okay, so he's saying y'all overlooking the positive of Jimmy being on this team. He shows everyone what a terrible QB looks like. That's a pretty good point to make. I think for Trey, I think the point we've made so far with Trey Lance with the 49ers is just that they want him to win the job the right way. With a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo already incumbent, it's just tough. Hey, I mean the dream. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Just got to 300 subscribers, everybody. If you enjoy my channel, if you enjoy my content, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you give a like on this video. And if you don't like my content, well, man, I'm in college, so I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel. Ekim saying he can't grow facial hair. I am 21 RMOB Nation. So, hey, give me some time, and I feel like I'm doing pretty good already. But, yeah, no, the Jimmy contract, it's terrible. And like Ekim's been saying in the comments, the first mistake of the 49ers was not to franchise Jimmy after that 2017 season. It is a huge mistake, in my opinion, that the 49ers make. It was just so tough. All right, we're going to get back to Vinny in a second. He just came back. All right, Vinny, I was just talking in the comments. No, of course, man, no worries. I want to get to the next player. You just brought up Jalen Hurd. The next guy I'm looking at for the 49ers in terms of the bad of training camp. There's two things I'm looking at right now. And you know what? I'm just going to dive right into this topic. Let's talk about the unvaccinated players on the 49ers. Right now, the 49ers have over 90% of their players vaccinated. I believe only 3 or 4 really guys are left in terms of the unvaccinated players on the team. But looking up and down at the unvaccinated players from strictly a football perspective, 49ers are going to lose Nick Bosa, Brandon Ayuk, or Jason Veret at any point in the season for one game, that could make or break that game. The 49ers could literally lose a game because these players are unvaccinated at this point. And this is a point in general that I've been noticing more, Vinny. You tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I feel like for the whole vaccination thing with the NFL specifically, it seems like for players on the bubble of a roster, people are trying to get onto teams. It matters so much whether or not they're vaccinated, in fact, to the point where teams aren't trying out players who are unvaccinated. But then you look at the star players, the guys who they know they're not going to get cut from their team. They don't have to get vaccinated because they know their value. So to me, it's going to be an issue with the NFL again this season. COVID isn't going away. In fact, it might be coming back stronger than ever. So with these guys specifically unvaccinated, if the 49ers lose Nick Bosa, if the 49ers lose Jason Veret, or Brandon Ayuk for 1, 2, 3 games this season, those are 1, 2, or 3 potential losses that otherwise they wouldn't have had. So not that other players are not that we don't want all these players to be healthy and safe and all that kind of stuff, right? But with the specific rules in place that the NFL has this season, with the way the season is going to be looking, with the way the NFL and the league is treating unvaccinated players specifically, it could be a huge issue for the 49ers where, like we saw with that Green Bay game on that Thursday night, the 49ers could literally lose a game because Nick Bosa, Brandon Ayuk, or Jason Veret are unvaccinated. I think it's going to be a huge issue for this team.
Mm-hmm. And the good thing, though, is that they are 90%. That is, like, the majority of the guys. It is just, like, 4 or 5. Like, if you look at a 53-man roster, it's, like, probably, like, 5, 6 guys that you're looking at that aren't. And so there's a lot of other teams in the NFL that are having, worse, that don't have that 90%. And that's more of an issue than what the 49ers are facing. But at the same time, it is, at their own. Yeah.
It's a potential huge disadvantage for the 49ers. Right. Yeah. And the point is not that we're not trying to shame anyone or anything like that. It's just specifically that it's going to be a disadvantage for certain teams this season. Like you said, it's good that the 49ers are over 90%, but if the 49ers lose Nick Bosa for 2 games because he's unvaccinated and they don't win those 2 games, that could literally knock the 49ers out of the playoffs. I mean, this could make or break the 49ers season. So, I mean, I'm not going to go over all the public health responsibility, all the safety stuff. I know people constantly talk about it. I'm not here to talk about that. It's just the issue is that in football, you have to sacrifice so much to be in the NFL. It's a privilege to be in the NFL. It's not something that's just given to everybody. So for these players that are on the bubble of the roster that weren't otherwise vaccinated, that are getting vaccinated because they know they could literally be cut from their team if they don't perform well enough, it's going to be a huge issue. So I think I want to call it selfish of these certain players, but it's very frustrating that it seems like 3 of the 49ers best 6 or 7 players right now could just miss a game out of nowhere just because they haven't gotten vaccinated yet. And that's super frustrating.
And, Michael Irvin kind of put it, and someone just commented it too. Michael Irvin kind of put it in the, most simplest way, right? Like, he made it about football, and I think, based on what we've seen over the past year and a half, it seems like people have made this a political thing, and it's Michael Irvin kind of simpled down. It's just like, this will help you win football games, and that is literally the job of you as a player, is to help contribute to have the best chance to win football games. And it'll be interesting to see how it all kind of plays out. I'm pretty confident that they're gonna become fully vaccinated, and that it'll be
that's the hope. I know Nick Bosa is still doing his lab evaluations at this point. I know he's delving into the research. He's doing his deep dive. But I mean, we hope all these players get vaccinated. Like we saw with Mohamed Sanu, he's getting his second vaccination. He's already gotten his first. So the important thing here is that this issue isn't going away with the NFL. This isn't going to stop anytime soon. It's going to affect this season. It might even affect going into next season with the way things are looking with the pandemic right now. So to have players unvaccinated right now, it's a competitive disadvantage, and it's one that teams certainly are very aware of at this point. I mean, every single coach and every single staff member has to be vaccinated on these teams. The only people who have choices in terms of this are the players. So it is a huge issue, and I really hope more of these players get vaccinated. It's tough. And the difference is, and I just saw someone bring this up in the comments, is there are just different rules for players who are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. If you're vaccinated and you test positive, I believe it's only 2-3 days where you would technically be out as long as you get a negative test back, versus the opposite. I believe it's a 10-day window where Nick Bosa would literally miss 10 days. Where if he tests COVID positive on a Friday before Sunday, Nick Bosa could miss 2 straight games for the 49ers.
Yeah, it's pretty much like it was like the old rules of like last season. Like, but this, if you are fully vaccinated, it's not as much of a problem. Like it's like way less and way loose on restrictions and stuff.
Yeah, I just hope the 49ers don't miss the playoffs because Nick Bosa isn't vaccinated, or Brandon Ayuk isn't vaccinated, or they miss Jason Veret for a game. I mean, it's going to be a serious issue this season. And Vinny, let's move on to the next topic though. For you, we're going to end with 2 more bads of training camp. What's the last one you're looking at in terms of what 49ers have struggled with in training camp?
Again, I don't think this is necessarily like a bad thing, but it's something to look out for. I think it's more so how DeMeco Ryans kind of adjusts into his new defensive coordinator role, because Robert Saleh was extremely good at what he did. And it seems like, and the organization was pretty patient with Saleh also. And gave him that time, and he eventually blossomed into probably top 2-3 defensive coordinators in the league last year. But with DeMeco Ryans entering year 1, especially in the context of the 49ers kind of needing to show some progress, he's definitely going to be more reliant on his higher tier players than I think Robert Saleh was. I think they were both, obviously you need your good players to play good, but more so I think that would be more of a help to DeMeco Ryans than it would have been to Robert Saleh, because of the levels that they're at defensive coordinator. Like we mentioned before, an injury to Jason Veret wouldn't be that great. Not to mention, Fred Warner, who's never been hurt before, knock on wood. And, Nick Bosa, D Ford, those guys, Jaquiski Tart, Jimmy Ward. So I'm just interested to see how he'll adjust to, these next few weeks to really figure out what guys fit best for his defense and how they take that into the start of the season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a struggle for DeMeco Ryans definitely this season. I mean, you just can't expect him to do what Robert Saleh did these past 2 seasons with the 49ers. That's unrealistic. But with DeMeco Ryans in specific, if we're going to be positive, I think the hope is that with him, because he's so in tune with the personnel on this team, because he's been with the 49ers for as long as he has been, it's not going to be as much of a struggle for moving to a new defensive coordinator versus like we saw, like what other teams would have to do, like what the Rams did this past season. They moved to a completely new defensive coordinator who wasn't even a part of their staff before. So I think the hope with DeMeco Ryans is because of the continuity he has with the team, specifically with Fred Warner, who's the quarterback of the defense. It should be a smoother transition, but it's still definitely something to worry about with the 49ers. And he's a brand new defensive coordinator. He's never called those calls before, so we don't really know exactly what to expect from him. And I think the hope is that with the personnel that the 49ers have, if they stay healthy enough, it should be manageable. It shouldn't be too bad, but it's certainly a huge worry. And I think it's a great worry to bring up, definitely.
Real quick. So just to get some clarity on like what vaccinated players have to go through. This was as of May 26, 2021, so that could change within the next 2 weeks or whatever. But from this article on NFL.com, the new protocols say fully vaccinated players will no longer have to be tested daily, will not have to wear masks at team facilities, will not be subject to quarantine after exposure to a COVID-positive individual, will have no travel restrictions, may eat in team cafeteria and use the sauna and steam room. And then they will also, there won't be any capacity limits in the weight room, and they'll be allowed to interact with vaccinated family and friends during travel. So it's pretty much you don't have to do anything. Right. You're good to go. You're back to normal. Whereas unvaccinated players, they'll still have to be tested daily, wear masks, team facilities, subject to physical distancing, quarantine after exposure. Travel restrictions, will not be able to act with family and friends during travel, cannot eat in the cafeteria or use the sauna or steam room, and they'll be subjected to capacity limits in the room. So
good to know. Yeah. But it is a huge difference between the two, definitely. And I believe the most recent thing we had seen from the NFL, and I mentioned that before, and someone can go check in the comments and tell me if I'm wrong. But specifically, I believe if there's a positive test, the difference is that for a player like Nick Bosa, for example, who's unvaccinated, he would miss 10 straight days if he were to test positive, at least, versus a vaccinated player would only miss 2 to 3 days away from the team. So it's a competitive disadvantage, absolutely, for the teams, for the players. But Vinny, I'm trying to remember. You still got your last one, or is it back to
I just did my last one.
All right, so we'll go back to me. I just want to make sure. And yeah, you were talking about DeMeco Ryans just before me, and I think a huge part of this worry, and I'm going to go back to defense overall for me, is the DB depth on this team. Emmanuel Moseley already tested COVID positive. He may be unvaccinated because it doesn't seem like he's back already. I think he would have been back if he was vaccinated. So with Emmanuel Moseley out, with Ambry Thomas supposedly struggling in camp so far, I don't think the 49ers have a lot of options at cornerback outside of Jason Veret. And it's a huge worry for this team, not just this season, but for the next few seasons. They just don't have long-term options at the position. And I think they're kind of playing with fire, honestly, with this position a little bit, because like we've mentioned so many times with Jason Veret, the 49ers lose him, which is a very realistic outcome based on his injury history. It would deflate the season, I feel like, for the 49ers. So I feel like Jason Veret is one of the most important players on this team overall. And just with the DB depth in general, not having Ambry Thomas be successful in training camp is a huge blow for the 49ers. I don't want to say that's a wasted draft pick, but if you don't get anything out of Ambry Thomas from the corner position, that's just another spot where the 49ers are going to need to invest even more again. And they're just pushing that problem down the line. So I'm really frustrated with the way they've handled DB depth this season. I don't know if they should trade for Xavier Howard necessarily, but they have to do something else at the DB position. And like I think I just saw on my phone a few minutes ago, it seems like that I think Drake Kirkpatrick visited with the team, right? And he walked away because he couldn't get a contract done with the 49ers. So it's something I guess they're trying to address, but they just haven't done so far, and I think it's a huge worry going forward. And I just don't like the fact that the 49ers I just don't feel like they're handling that position that well this season. I think they need to do a much, much better job of it, and just get deeper. Really, that's it. With Ambry Thomas specifically, I just don't think you can expect much from corners taken outside the top 100 picks, let alone outside the top 45. So, yeah, Ambry Thomas not doing well. Emmanuel Moseley missing time. Not great news for the 49ers altogether. So, yeah. All right. Well, everyone, that was the good and the bad of training camp. We're going to do 2 last topics before we get out of here. Again, subscribe to Vinny's channel if you haven't already. It's just his name. You can go check him out on Twitter if you haven't already. His ad is right there. Make sure you go follow him. Keep up with everything he's doing. We'll be back this time. No, I don't know if this time next week. We'll be back Monday next week. We're going to be doing regular Monday shows throughout the rest of the regular season. So make sure you subscribe to both of our channels. We'll be doing it on Vinny's channel next week. Go and check out all the stuff he's been doing. But Vinny, I wanted to do 2 last topics before we get out of here. And I was texting you about these 2 this morning. Let's talk about the 49ers Super Bowl window. First of all, do you think the 49ers are in a Super Bowl window right now?
Yeah, I think it's hard not to say that they're not, because of the trade that they just made with Trey Lance. And maybe that's more so the pressure to get the Super Bowl. But I think if everything goes right, then I think the Super Bowl window is wide open. But I think, first off, I don't think, and we talked about this before, I don't think there should be the expectation of a Super Bowl this year.
No,
I don't think that should be the expectations. And I think the expectations will change if Jimmy Garoppolo is not on the roster next year, which I don't, if I had to guess today, I don't think he would be. I mean, there's still a chance that he could get traded even before this season. So, I think it is open, and I think just because of who they have on the team, the cap flexibility that they have, and all their players kind of entering their prime, entering their best years of football, I think it does kind of make it a Super Bowl window. And I think another aspect of it too is that I think Kyle Shanahan and the front office understand that, because compared to like what other teams are, there are people within the 40, like the main three guys of the 49ers organization have a like certain emotional attachment to the 49ers, right? Like Kyle Shanahan being a ball boy, his son I think is a ball boy now, which is super cool to see. John Lynch wanting to be a part of this, and kind of like seeing the potential that this team had. And most importantly, as much crap as people want to give to Jed York, one thing you cannot doubt is that he loves this 49ers team, and he
Absolutely
wants to win with this team. And you can see that with the rest of the three main figureheads, right? They all want to win with the 49ers. And so with that, there is a little bit of urgency to get that window, but I think it can very much open if Trey Lance is on the right development and right trajectory, which is a lot asking a 21-year-old kid to do. But I think it is open. I just don't think it's necessarily open for this season.
I agree with that. I think the 49ers Super Bowl window is cracked open, but I don't think it's going to be fully open until next season specifically. If you look at the rookie contract, the way it works, years 2 through 4 of that rookie deal is really the sweet spot to win with rookie quarterbacks. You saw what happened with Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes. You've seen the success that guys like Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson have had early on. It's all within that 2 to 4 year window, right? Rookies just haven't succeeded to that kind of level in their rookie season. In fact, kind of the only guys who really have done it to any sort of level are guys like RG3, right? And who of course play with Kyle Shanahan, Herbert, right? And but in terms of guys being able to like win a Super Bowl the rookie season, it's just not something that happens. And for the best of the best, it doesn't even necessarily happen. So with the 49ers, with their Super Bowl window, it's not this year specifically because Jimmy Garoppolo is on the roster right now. Like you mentioned before, he's 13.5% of the 49ers salary cap. I've beat this drum over and over, but the 49ers are not going to win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo making that high of a percentage of their salary cap. It just is unfeasible at this point. So I think for them, if they can cut bait from Jimmy Garoppolo before week 1, if Trey Lance is the week 1 starter, and they can either use that money this season or roll it over to the following season and add extra cap space on top of it and double up for 2022, I think that's the way you win the Super Bowl with the 49ers. And it's an outcome that is possible right now. But the 49ers just have to be willing to pull the trigger, Vinny. That's the thing so far that has been frustrating to me. It's not that they should have necessarily pulled the trigger with Jimmy Garoppolo, but all the communication so far makes me feel like they're unwilling to, which to me doesn't make sense. I've seen a lot of 49ers fans that are like, oh, Trey Lance can start and Jimmy Garoppolo can be the backup. It makes so much sense. Look how bad the backup position was forever with the 49ers. But I disagree with that a lot because, like I said, from the financial perspective, it's near damn impossible to win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo making that much money. But then if you just look at it from the emotion perspective, from the locker room perspective, people know what happened with Colin Kaepernick and with Alex Smith. It split up the 49ers locker room. You don't want that sort of situation again with Trey Lance and with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I don't think they can carry the two together at once. And I think it's just going to be a thing of the 49ers are going to win a Super Bowl. It's because it's going to be Trey Lance doing it. It's not going to be because Jimmy Garoppolo took the 49ers over the hump. In fact, 2019 was the season for Jimmy Garoppolo to do that. It was the least percentage of the salary cap he was ever making. It was his peak in terms of his physically, because with how hurt Jimmy Garoppolo has been, it doesn't seem like he's going to be getting any better at this point. So I think for the 49ers, if they wanted to win a Super Bowl, they want to win a Super Bowl. It's going to be in these next 2 to 4 years. Specifically, you look at guys like you mentioned before, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Jason Veret, Eric Armstead, Jimmy Ward, Jacoski Tart, Trent Williams even. I mean, Mike McGlinchey, Alex Mack, all these guys, 2 to 4 years is kind of the window the 49ers are looking at right now. So I think if they're not going to win the Super Bowl this season, they should at least establish themselves as legit contenders with Trey Lance as that quarterback, because getting him that experience early on, to me, is the most important thing for Trey Lance's development. And if you do want to win a Super Bowl with Trey Lance, you want to get him early playoff reps. You want to get him in high-pressure situations early on in his NFL career. In order for the 49ers to do that, I think they got to start Trey Lance from week 1.
Yeah.
I really do believe that.
Yeah, and with all that, I think I mentioned it before, but I think the 49ers are doing the right thing and being careful and kind of monitoring this whole situation with Jimmy and Trey Lance, because you don't want to rush the guy to the point where you're potentially going to see Shanahan out the door in 2 to 3 years. Because if it goes wrong, then he won't be the coach in 2 years, which we obviously don't want to see that. And that's where I think, I am of that disagreeing opinion of yours. I mean, in the sense that I'm on like the other side of it. I think there is still like diligence and, in a way, some value in keeping Garoppolo on the roster. Just in the sense that, you don't know what's going to happen with Trey Lance. There could be just like one freak play where he does get hurt, and then you're resulting in either putting in, Josh Rosen or Nate Sudfeld into the game, and that's super important. And another
thing,
can I
talk about that point really quick though? I'm sorry, because I've seen a lot of people bring this up. I want to make sure I acknowledge this. If the 49ers are going to be successful, it's going to be because of Trey Lance. So if Trey Lance gets hurt, it's out the window. It's impossible. I mean, I honestly think it's impossible. The amount of draft capital the 49ers have invested in Trey Lance, how much money, time, and effort they've put into him, the only way I believe the 49ers will reach the Super Bowl, will win the Super Bowl with the way they're currently constructed, I think it's all going to be because of Trey Lance. And because of that, that's why I feel so strongly about this Jimmy Garoppolo situation. It's that because of, and we'll cover this next, but because of the downside of Jimmy Garoppolo versus like what we've seen with Trey Lance, it's just, if they're going to win, if they're going to be successful in the NFL, if they're going to get beyond the hump, beyond just a really good playoff team, it's going to be because of Trey Lance. It's not going to be because of Jimmy Garoppolo. So I know there is the idea that 49ers fans have seen how bad seasons go with quarterbacks getting injured, quarterbacks going down, but I'm sorry, the 49ers can go and just sign an Andy Dalton type if they really want to. They can go and get a Nick Foles. They can go and do something like that to where it's not necessary to have Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster. That's just kind of how I feel at this point. And I know a lot of 49ers fans don't feel that way, and there are certainly a lot who would agree with you. In fact, I see a lot of people giving me flack on Twitter for the specific point. But I think in general, just the way the 49ers are set up now with the cap, with their football team, with Kyle Shanahan, Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be the reason that the 49ers go beyond what they've already done.
Yeah, and I can get that. And, another point that I think in my opinion, thinks why Garoppolo is, honestly important to have on the roster is, who are they going to be? Like, kind of like you mentioned, like if Trey Lance is out, like he's done. But, like, would it be it's just like what other guys – like, could they get? And like you mentioned this to me before, like the rollover, I get it. That makes sense. Right. But, like, who are they going to, like, my question would be, well, I have 2 questions, I guess. My question would be, like, would it be, like, who could they get like this season in particular for this season, because I think we both agree that there shouldn't be Super Bowl expectations this year. That's going to help because it's about this year, right?
Right.
I mean,
okay.
as much as it's not like the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl winner is past, this season.
I'll bring up a few names for you who, if the 49ers, if they cut bait with Jimmy Garoppolo, two names I'm looking at right now, Gardner Minshew. You could certainly get him for next to nothing right now. I don't think he's as great as Jimmy Garoppolo, but for the price you're paying for him relative to what you would be paying to Jimmy Garoppolo, it'd be much more worth it. Nick Foles is another guy who's very much available right now. Jacoby Brissett is a guy who could become available. I think there are potential other options. It's just with Jimmy Garoppolo's price point, unless he's going to take a pay cut, I will eviscerate this team if Jimmy Garoppolo is on the roster. I think it's a waste to me. It's not that I don't understand the point that you're making that there's a lot of risk associated with Trey Lance, but what I'm saying is 49ers have already made the biggest risks. They've already made.
They got him,
But think about how much they just did to go and get Trey Lance.
Yeah.
So for them to say to themselves, oh, we're going to back this up with having Jimmy Garoppolo on our roster is the most expensive backup in history of the NFL and has the 5th highest cap hit in the league overall, not just among quarterbacks, among all players. I just can't live with that right now.
Yeah.
That's
well,
the
then,
issue I have with it.
So then let me ask you this then. Would the 49ers have a better chance of winning if, say, like Garoppolo was on the roster, or if Garoppolo wasn't on the roster and say, Nate Sudfeld or Rosen is your backup quarterback in the event that Trey Lance gets hurt? Unfortunately, we don't want that to happen. Or would they be better if Garoppolo was on the team, but say like Fred Warner or Nick Bosa got hurt again and they were out for the year? Like what situation would be like, does that make sense?
I think it would hurt the 49ers more to lose a Fred Warner or a Nick Bosa.
So that's what I'm saying. So that's kind of like my point. It's just like you want to have that as expensive as that insurance policy is, what you're going to get with him, and the expectation for him isn't going to be the same because he is a backup now in theory, right? So that's where I think I kind of and there is a way that they could get, a more reliable backup, like for far less, but you're still trading. You're eventually going to be trading draft capital for that. Yeah. Maybe not as much as because I don't know if there's any free agent quarterbacks that they're going to want to pick up. That's really going to be better than Josh Rosen or Nate Sudfeld. But
no, not necessarily.
That backup, you're trading for a backup quarterback, which I don't. And this is under the assumption, like, if Trey Lance doesn't get hurt, this isn't a problem, right? And Trey Lance plays all the games, and that's it.
And that's the thing. I think 49ers fans are projecting too much with Trey Lance. The difference between saying Jimmy Garoppolo might get hurt versus Trey Lance is that we know we have the sample size with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's a matter of the fact that it's more likely that he'll get hurt than not. So I think 49ers fans are just a little too worried with Trey Lance and him getting hurt and all that kind of stuff. And I guess my point overall is that if Trey Lance gets hurt and he's the starter, it doesn't matter if they bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, in my opinion, would they win more games with him versus like a Gardner Minshew? Sure. But is it going to make that big of a difference to where they're going to advance further in the playoffs and potentially go to a Super Bowl or anything like that? I don't believe so personally. Yeah. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to make that difference. And to me, that's the most important thing right now. And because of that, I just can't get over keeping Jimmy as a backup plan. It's just not a plan for success. And I think the problem, like I said, going back to this, is that specifically, I think it would split up the locker room if Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance were on the team at the same time and Trey Lance was the starter. I really think it would split up the locker room in a way that 49ers fans maybe aren't anticipating right now. And that's another issue I have with it. There are these cap implications. There's the worst case scenario with Jimmy. There's all these other things. But to me, the emotions of the locker rooms and just with the with the trajectory the 49ers are on, it's just not prudent to keep Jimmy Garoppolo on this roster. And I just don't want to waste that cap space because it is such an important piece of the pie. And especially considering this, Vinny, I think next offseason, what most people maybe don't realize about the cap and contracts and everything is there are a ton of players who are – it's going up, but it's not going just up by a certain amount. It's going to be going up by a higher percentage than it's ever gone up in any offseason ever in NFL history. So the difference to me next season is going to be that we're going to see we're going to see all these players who signed 1-year deals this past season. Your Jason Verrett's of the world, your not Emmanuel Mosley, but all these players DJ Jones, Terry Hyder, right? All these guys who otherwise would have signed a 2-3 year deal. We're signing 1-year deals. So I think there's going to be a ton of free agents available. And that's just the issue with Jimmy is that you know what, let's go to this last topic because we're going to go for 10 more minutes. But the downside of Jimmy Garoppolo is not worth it to me. The downside of Jimmy Garoppolo potentially getting hurt, it's not worth the upside that Jimmy Garoppolo presents. And specifically, let me run you through this scenario, Vinny. If the 49ers, let's say, start Jimmy Garoppolo week 1, he gets injured week 2, which is very likely. It's not unlikely. It's very much a possibility. 49ers would be on hook for all of his money for this season, no matter what, and they would be on the hook for half or more of his money for next season. So then you're talking about the 49ers. We just talked about the 49ers Super Bowl window. To me, Vinny, this is the reason why I'm so adamant that the 49ers have to cut bait from Jimmy Garoppolo is because I think Jimmy Garoppolo can bring the 49ers, if this bad scenario does happen, you can bring them from contenders to just a playoff team. I honestly believe that could be the difference between the two, that Jimmy Garoppolo, because of the cap implications, because of him getting hurt, because of that scenario potentially happening, that isn't unlikely at all. In fact, I think it's more likely than not that the downside that Jimmy Garoppolo presents, I think the 49ers are playing with fire if Jimmy Garoppolo is on the roster. I honestly do. Because to me, like I said so many times, Jimmy Garoppolo is like the 19th best quarterback in the NFL. So for paying him as the 5th best guy right now, it's just such a problem that the 49ers like they have the option to get out of it, Vinny. And I've called the Jimmy Garoppolo contract a good contract before, and I'll say this: it's a good contract if the 49ers are willing to take the out in his contract. That's my biggest issue right now. If the 49ers aren't willing to take the out in Jimmy Garoppolo's contract, why the hell is it even there? It doesn't matter for the 49ers. That's the frustration I have right now with this team, is that if they just go along saying, oh, yeah, it makes a ton of sense to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, hey, look at all this stuff, right? Jimmy Garoppolo's a winner. The point is that with the salary cap in general, everything is so relative that the potential downside of Jimmy Garoppolo getting hurt, of Jimmy Garoppolo potentially splitting the locker room, of Jimmy Garoppolo potentially losing games for this team and committing a lot of turnovers is not worth. It's just not worth it to me anymore, Vinny.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that, and I'm not just pro Jimmy just because I got the Italian flag behind me and I'm Italian American and Jimmy's Italian American and all that. But I mean, I think they're being very diligent with this move, and I think there's definitely some fair points that you made, but I think it's just a matter of going, and it's hard to, based on evidence that we've shown, it's hard not going into the season thinking that there's a chance that Jimmy doesn't get hurt. And I guess most of my hesitancy in moving on from him just comes from just the context of just this season. In terms of this season, I think they should keep him next year when you can. I think you can, but $50 million extra does sound very, very enticing. But does that, outweigh, them potentially winning or losing games this season? Because as like Parag Marath in the front office has shown, they find a way to make the money work, and in some ways, like it is going to be ultimately it will be on the players to be worth that value, but they have made some friendly contracts to where the money isn't a big issue. Like it could have been a lot worse with the money and everything, but I just think there is something there with Garoppolo. I think it's more towards the tail end, though, like with a lot of fans, just because it is, you have a nice brand new shiny toy in Trey Lance and you want to see that. Yeah. And you did, like you mentioned, you did invest all this draft capital and all that. And, like I mentioned before, if he is ready and he's prepared, he should start week 1. Like there's no reason for you not to start it, especially if he is better than Garoppolo in camp and he is heading towards that direction. So I just think the perception of him would be a lot different if he didn't get hurt as much.
I agree with that.
And if he wasn't like, it's not his fault that he made $27 million. Like why? No, and I don't think there's a scenario personally where he takes a pay cut, because why would he?
No, I agree with that.
What reason would you have to take a pay cut, especially with what
he's had every opportunity to take a pay cut so far. If it would have happened already, the 49ers
would have been done by now.
It would have been done by now. I agree with that point specifically.
So I think it's just going to be a clean slate.
But let me run you through this, Vinny. In order to maximize the 49ers Super Bowl potential, I think they have to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo, unfortunately. Because in my mind,
I think eventually, yeah. I mean, maybe that comes sooner rather than later for some. Like it seems like for your end, it seems has to come.
But what I'm saying is that to maximize it the most, you have to do it sooner rather than later, because it is a timing issue with the 49ers, to where if you hang on to Jimmy Garoppolo for too long, there are some financial issues that you could have down the line. You mentioned that Prague has done a great job. I agree. It's not that the 49ers have done a bad job mismanaging their cap. In fact, they've done a decent situation managing their cap. And in fact, that's why I think they should have even more of a reason to cut Jimmy Garoppolo before the season, because in my mind, the 49ers, if they pull this off the right way, they can become Super Bowl contenders, I think. But beyond that, I think they can build a much better team than they did in 2019 if they do this the right way. And if they, I'll run through the scenario for everybody, because I've mentioned it a million times. I'm like the flag bearer of this position. This is my thing. If this happens, Vinny, I'm gonna feel so vindicated. But for the 49ers cut Jimmy or trade him before week 1, roll over the money to next season. I'm just explaining this for everyone at home if you haven't already heard. They do this the right way, the 49ers can not only have the extra money that they wouldn't pay Jimmy Garoppolo next season, but they would have another $23 million on top of that money. So if we're talking about building a Super Bowl contender for the 49ers, if we're talking about a team-building perspective, if we're talking about maximizing the potential of this roster, like we've been talking about with Trey Lance, maximizing those 2 through 4 years for his contract, the way to do that, in my opinion, is to spend as much in free agency next season as possible and load this team up where you have a wide receiver 3, you have another cornerback, you get another edge defender, so where the 49ers will not just have a great rookie and a really great playmaker in Trey Lance, but they'll have, in my opinion, they can build the best roster in the NFL. And that's why I want to do things this way, because I think the 49ers have the potential to do that. And what I'm saying is that you can win a Super Bowl if you keep Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster eventually. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying you could build a dynasty if you pull this off the right way. And that's what I want the 49ers to do specifically. I think they could win 2 to 3 Super Bowls with Trey Lance in the first few years that they have him, if they pull this off the right way and cut bait from Jimmy Garoppolo before week 1. And that's the perspective I have for everyone. And it's not that I don't think they should dismiss this season or anything, or punt or anything like that. But in my opinion, like we've been over, years 2 through 4 are the times to maximize that Trey Lance contract. I want to take full advantage of it. That's my whole thing. And if you don't take full advantage of it, it's it's wasted opportunity, in my opinion. And it was kind of pointless for the 49ers to do all that they did to get Trey Lance in the first place. The whole point of the rookie contract is that they are so cheap and that you can build such a great team around them. Look what the Browns are doing right now. They rolled over money from last season. They have $215 million in salary cap spending this season. The salary cap is $185 million. So I think the 49ers can do the same sort of thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I want them to build a dynasty. And this, in my opinion, is the only way to do it. That might be a little harsh. And I know that's a very specific position. And I know honestly, I haven't found many people who share that position with me. But if you are a 49ers fan, if you want them to maximize Trey Lance, if you want them to be able to not just win a Super Bowl, but win multiple Super Bowls, the way to do it is to cut bait with Jimmy Garoppolo right now, unfortunately. I know that could hurt this season, and I know it hurts the potential of, if Trey Lance gets hurt. I understand the scenarios, but to me, because of the play that the 49ers have already made, because of all the risks that they've already taken, you have to make that upside move. You can't just be constantly worrying about the downside, unfortunately. I think because of everything that they've put into this is the biggest swing in Kyle Shanahan's career, in my opinion. You have to maximize that swing. And this is the way to do it. Unfortunately, there's just no other way for the 49ers right now. It's
definitely tempting on the financial side for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely is.
All right, everyone. I appreciate Vinny letting me rant there for the last few minutes.
Good,
I'm sorry, Vinny. No.
You're good.
Everyone.
You're not the only one that thinks that, man. There's a lot of people that think that. So
no, yeah, and I listen. If you disagree with me, go follow me on Twitter right now. Let's talk about it. I'm happy to talk about it. Everybody, make sure you go follow Vinny on Twitter. If you haven't, go subscribe to him on YouTube. We'll be on his channel next week we'll come up with a name for this eventually, Vinny. I'm sure we will. But for everybody, I'll be back Thursday. I'm gonna take a few days off. I am moving, actually, so I'm just beyond excited for that. But thanks for sticking around, everybody. Make sure you subscribe and like this video if you haven't already. I'm sure I'll be doing some more stuff throughout the week. Like I said, I'll be back Thursday. I'm planning on doing a show Friday. I appreciate you all sticking around, and make sure you go check out all Vinny's stuff. I'll put out an article later this week too. So if you guys want more content from me, expect an article in the next few days. I'll be putting something out, maybe on Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe on the pressure that the 49ers are creating. But that's where I'm going to end it for today. Thank you so much for sticking around, Vinny. I appreciate everyone who stuck around for the entire stream. Thanks again. All right. Have a great Monday, everyone, and happy training camp.
Yes, sir.